Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited. This is my first Zoom meeting I'm doing, so bear with me, but hopefully you'll all enjoy the show and you'll have some great questions for me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So, a few of you, I think, at the talk have been to the nursery, but this is going to be a complete snapshot of a lot of mini subjects within the nursery. I think each of them could be their own talk. So I'm just going to kind of breeze through some of the things we do at the nursery. Here's my outline. I'm just going to give you a little bit about me and how I came to the nursery, a little history about the nursery. I'll go into a little bit of what we do at the nursery, and I'll then transition into some gardening, like what are some good gardening activities to do in the fall now. And then we have a special little update of our Grassroots native plant book that we've been working on and revising, and we should have that out printed in the next month. And then we'll do some questions, and I think we'll do some questions in between the nursery operations and the gardening activities too, a few. Okay, so I started out as a re-entry into college. I had children first, and then I decided to go back to school. I got my Hort degree at Cabrillo College here in Santa Cruz. And my focus at that point was in crop production. I thought I wanted to be an organic farmer. I had to do a special studies requirement, and it was pretty freed up to be how I wanted it to be. And I decided to do it on the habitats and species within Santa Cruz County, native to the area. And that's when I bought my first Jepson manual, and I completely got hooked, and I switched directions and decided I wanted to get a degree in plant ecology, more of a focus. And so I had to stick around and do some more transfer classes to get to UCSC. And I ended up getting an environmental studies degree with biology, and my focus was plant ecology. While I was a student there, I was lucky enough to get work study at the UCSC Arboretum, and I got to completely focus on native collections of California. And so I was able to go out and collect in the wild and do a lot of propagation. And that's where I learned a lot of my skills from Brett Hall, who used to be the director there and collections director. And as my time at school was ending, I saw that the San Francisco watershed was hiring, and I applied and I got the job. And if some of you have been around for a while, you know that that was a project of Actera way back when. And I got hired on part-time. And I also got hired on part-time here in Santa Cruz for a for-profit restoration, Central Coast Wilds, as their seed collector and propagator. So in 2005, I got hired on full-time at Actera, the San Francisco Watershed Council, and became the nursery manager. And then I became the director and botanical consultant in 2015. So I've been there coming on, I think it's right around 17 years now, which is pretty amazing. And obviously I must love it because I'm still around, and I do. It's a very magical place, and I love growing for all our projects, and just how the nursery has grown since we first started. So I'll give you a little bit of history. When I came on, the nursery was behind a house in Atherton, and it was very small. We had a little shed, and we had a main shade house building that was maybe, I don't know, 50 feet by 20 feet. And we had a few cages that we would grow our oaks in at that time. And at that point, we were only growing for our San Francisco Watershed Council projects along San Francisco Creek and Arrastradero. And that's all we grew for it when I came on. So it was pretty small. And then in the winter of 2003, the nursery, the people that we had the nursery at in Atherton actually were selling the land. So we had to start scouting for a new nursery home. We looked all around. We looked on some mid-pin land, and we looked down at the Baylands. And we ended up in Foothills Park, which is up in Palo Alto. And at that point, there was absolutely nothing there but an old greenhouse. And for the first few months, we were in the greenhouse, and we moved in the winter. So it was kind of an interesting time. We had to get water from the fire hydrant, and that was really interesting. And then that following summer, 2004, we actually built the nursery office that you see me in front of there. And we had that same main shade house from the old nursery. So what does the nursery do? If some of you are new, you might not know exactly all our projects. Like Hannah said, we mostly grow for our own internal projects, and we have 9 main sites, such as Burn Preserve, Foothills Park, Arrastradero, San Francisco Creek, Cooley Landing, Redwood Creek, McClellan, and let's see, I know I'm forgetting a few because I didn't write them all down. Stolstaff Park, and did I get Burn in there? I might have. Redwood Grove, there we go. And then 20%, or maybe a little more depending on the year, is a contract grow that we grow for public agencies like the Water District and Mid-Peninsula Open Space, or like biological consultants that are doing restoration for cities and such. And then about 15% is grown for local sales. And we used to do CMPS, Santa Clara chapter plant sales with them twice a year. And due to COVID, there was no plant sales anymore. So we do also have some local landscapers, and I've worked with a few local residents that do a lot of restoration on their land that get plants from us. As I was saying, some of the projects we do with Mid-Peninsula Open Space, we've been working with them ever since I've been at the nursery, 17 years. And when the Mount Umunum project came up, we were asked to go and collect on Mount Umunum. I think that was 2015 is when the project started. And so I collected seeds there for a few years, and then the project was a little bit delayed. But some of the plants that grow up there are a bit uncommon, and they're annuals, and it's hard to collect the seed from them in enough, in an amount that we can use for restoration. So we've been growing the plants at the nursery for seed enhancement. And these are some of the really cool plants that grow out there. Clarkia breweri, which is so beautiful. If you ever get a chance to see them, you got to smell them. They're one of the Clarkias that just have this heavenly smell. And then the Menzelia lindleyi, the blazing stars. And I give Midpen the seeds, and they've been enhancing the upper top garden at the tower, and they're doing really well. So we'll keep doing that. And this is the tower garden with plants we grew from them from the local seed there that we collected. So I just was going to touch on some nursery operations. We do pretty much all our seed collecting and propagation for all our projects. We don't bring in any plants from any other nurseries. And I'll kind of go into the best management practices. If any of you have heard about the Phytophthora, the root Phytophtheras that were happening out in restoration projects, I'll kind of go over a little bit of that. So like I said, about 90% of the plants we grow at the nursery are hand collected in local watersheds. And we keep a database of everything that has ever been collected and grown at the nursery. So I was going to bring a label to show everyone. We basically, I have 3-letter codes for watersheds and open space preserves, and we do have permits from Midpen to collect on their lands. And we also have permits for some of the open spaces that we steward for cities. So it gives us quite an array of habitats to collect from. So in order to kind of keep it straight, I've given 3-letter codes to watersheds and open space preserves. And then each year we start, say I'm collecting some heteromelies in January of this year, and it was the first seed collection, it would get the number 20001. So the first two numbers are the year it was collected and then the sequential collection of that year. So at the end of the year, say I collected 400 collections, it would be 20400. And then all the information on the collection site, etc., date, species, all go into the database. Then we have storage there at the nursery, and everything is organized by watersheds so that when I'm looking for certain seed for certain projects, I can just get to them very easily. And the fun thing is the seed cleaning. And this year, unfortunately, due to COVID, we've had nursery volunteers 2 days a week, and due to COVID, we had to stop having our volunteers, and most of them had been with us for over 10 years, 15 years, and we really miss them. And but we were lucky enough to have some AmeriCorps interns this year. I had Haley and Sienna for 2 days during the summer. And then we had summer college interns this year, which was a great program. And they came out and helped do some nursery projects like seed cleaning. And we're going to be having fall interns starting next week, college interns. So I'm really excited about that and teaching more. So a lot of because we are starting from seed, a lot of natives really need some treatment to break their seed dormancy. And I kind of try and think like the seed a lot of times, like what processes is it going through out in nature? And some seeds like lupins need to sit in the soil for a year or so in the wild. And so if you do a hot water soak or a scarification with sandpaper, it breaks that hard seed coat and their dormancy, and then they're ready to germinate. Again, I've also used any kind of type of berries that maybe some mammals are eating and are excreting, are kind of going through their gut and getting acid. So I don't really have any acid at the nursery, but I actually have been using hot coffee, which is very acidic. And it's worked really well for different species like dogwoods and snowberries and a few of those fruits that animals are ingesting. Then you have stratification, and you can have cold and warm stratification. So different plants they drop in the summer, they hang out in the soil all winter, they're getting rained on and kind of getting rotty in the soil and getting cold and freezing. So some seeds need you to mimic that in the nursery. So we call that stratification. And most things like ribeys and blackberries and hazelnuts, they all need stratification. So is what we do is they go into a bag, usually with peat or perlite or vermiculite. I've used them all, and a little bit of moisture. And then, as you can see, I have the month that they need to come out. Some things go in for a month, some 3 months. It's all species dependent. And then the fun part is the propagation. So that's when the seeds come up, and we get to like move them up into containers. And as I said, most of what we grow is from seed, but some things are really hard from seed, like manzanitas. And sometimes you don't have time to wait for the seed. Somebody could order something and you need plants, species ready in a shorter amount of time. So you can do cuttings, and we also do layering and divisions. So divisions I usually try and do in the fall, and those are things like bleeding hearts, or some of the bulbs sometimes make bulblets. And then a lot of the cuttings I do are mostly the manzanitas because they're really hard from seed. And some of the salvias are very easy from cuttings and can be somewhat tricky from seed sometimes. And then here we are with the summer interns again, and they're upsizing. So basically we just prick out, and you can kind of see how small the seedlings are when we prick them out, and then they're upsized into these containers that we love to use. They're called tree bands, and basically the bottoms of them are, they don't have a bottom. And it basically helps the roots by not root bounding and growing straight down. And I find that these do really well in all our restoration sites, these type of pots, growing the plants in them. And then we'll just kind of go into the BMPs. So BMP stands for the Best Management Practices for Clean Nursery Production. And this provides an overall outline for producing container-grown plants free of Phytophthora species. So I'm sure most of you have heard of sods, sudden oak death, and that is a type of Phytophthora, but that Phytophthora is spread by spores in the air. And the Phytophthora we're worried about at the nursery is mostly a root-borne Phytophthora. So I think it was in 2015, there was some restoration plants that were discovered to have Phytophthora, the root Phytophthora, And it really triggered the whole restoration community to come together with public agencies, uh, uh, pathologists, public public management people, and nursery growers, and we got together and came up with these protocols to grow clean, Phytophthora free, hopefully, plants. Because a lot of the ways that nurseries were growing plants were just we just weren't, everybody kind of was doing the same thing. So we all learned a lot. And basically, if you start clean, you keep it clean. And I'll kind of show you some before and after pictures of the nursery. I grabbed a few out. So on the left here, you see before we got the protocols together, and then on the right, after. And you notice we've got everything up off the ground now. There's no plants on the ground anymore. We ground tarped and graveled of some of the houses. And yeah, that's just a fast kind of overview. And then before, we actually used to make our soil in a cement mixer that the rangers let us use, which was pretty fun. It was a great workout. And now you'll see on the right that we actually spray our feet before entering the nursery or any of the houses or the soil with 70% isopropyl alcohol. And you'll also notice that the soil bin is a bit different. So we've lined it with a pond liner, and underneath it is 3 inches of gravel so that you never have any standing water in there, and then we keep it covered from weeds and such. It probably took us a couple years to really streamline the nursery into the new protocols. It's all about kind of managing your risks and keeping the flow of the nursery. So here you'll see we've actually got all our used pots from our projects, and they kind of go into a separate area of the nursery. They're never near any of the production area. And we sanitize them with Isan or bleach. And that's used for all our internal projects. Now, for some of our external contract grows, we haven't quite figured out how to go about sanitizing in a way that they've kind of deemed that we have to have new pots right now. So it'd be great to try and work on some solarizing. I would really like to work on maybe creating some type of solarizing or steaming in the future. Because at 140 degrees, you kill Phytophthora after 20 minutes. We also now pair bait in our nursery. And that's basically, we take a sampling of our plants grown on a table, and we put a pear in that bucket, and we basically water it 6 times every 15 minutes. And we get what's called a pear leachate. And then we incubate our pears for about 3 days. And then we send them off to the Department of Agriculture for testing. And the pears actually attract Phytophthora. So they'll infest the pear, and they can plate it at the Department of Ag for us and tell us if we have Phytophthora. And we test a bunch every year, and for the past few years, we've not found any Phytophthora in the nursery, which is awesome. And we can go into any grilling questions at this point.
Okay, Deanna, there is one from Richard Mandel, and he asks, do you make your current propagation information available for each of the species which you propagate? It would help people share native plants within the neighborhood.
Yes, I did create a spreadsheet. I think it's got 100 or more species on it with collection times and how I propagate them. And I don't see why I can't share that.
There are no more questions in the chat box. Does anybody have any questions right now?
Deanna, where you want to share what, and maybe you already had, and I was like totally not paying attention. How many different agencies that get to buy plants from you?
Right now,
not just Grassroots.
No. So Grassroots, like I said, is probably about 65% of what we grow. And given in a given year, we could be growing, 30 or 40% for other agencies. And so Mid-Peninsula Open Space, we grow for their restoration projects. We also grow for the Santa Clara Valley Water District for different projects, and we've grown for H.T. Harvey for different projects they have around.
Thanks.
Okay, the questions are now, the dam is opened and they're flowing in. So we've got some soil questions. I'm going to combine two of them because they're about soil. One of them is, do you steam or treat your soil mixes? And for those interested in growing at home, is there a seed mix you can, or a soil mix that you stand by?
So when we were doing the BMPs, I actually reformulated our soil mix we get from Linso because there were some components they used that had a high risk, like sand and compost and topsoil. So I've redesigned our mix. It's pretty much soilless now, and we mostly use that. But we have different tiers at the nursery, and so all the contract grows for Water District and Mid-Penn are at a tier 1, and I pasteurize all the soil for them. And I have a pasteurizer that does about 1/8 of a yard at a time, and another smaller one that's really small. And yeah, if people are interested, I probably could let them know what's in our soil mix that I created. I hope that answered that.
Okay, I'm going to do one more question. There's the next one in line, and then we might save the rest to the end to make sure you can get through all your slides. The next question is, do you have resources on species that are especially good for balcony gardening?
Oh, balcony. So in pots or vertical, I think you could play around, and it depends on if it's sunny or shady. So some shady species are like yerba buena, and strawberries do really well in pots in balcony gardens. I mean, I grow over 200 species in containers at the nursery. I mean, if basically most natives can be in containers, but it just depends on like the herbaceous versus shrubs, like, how long they want to be in the container and how big of a container can your balcony have. So other fun things would be yarrow. I think a lot of different manzanitas can actually, if it's pretty sunny, can handle being in pots. And sometimes you can have a few smaller perennials under the manzanita that likes the sun and make like a mini habitat in a container if you want. Okay.
So yeah, we'll save the rest till the end, and I'll
Okay,
try to bring
so I will move on. And I forgot to let, I'm sure most people know what this plant is. Trillium chloropetalum, the giant wake robin. I forgot to label it, sorry. And this was taken in Foothills Park this spring. So I'm going to go into the gardening kind of edge of it all. And I'm sure you're all kind of interested in native gardening or you wouldn't be here. So I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I'll still kind of put it out there that, you know, why plant with natives? Well, they create a more sustainable, well-adapted garden. They conserve water. And most of the native shrubs and trees won't require any supplemental water once established. Now, our native shrubs and trees can be a bit slow. I always tell people to be patient. They take at least 2 to 3 winters to establish their roots before they'll grow. You know, we live in a Mediterranean climate and they've just been, that's kind of what they need. They really want to get a root system established before they'll take off. They have lower maintenance, minimal diseases and insect problems, fewer weeds once they're established. I've been sheet mulching at the nursery. I was having to do a bunch of weed whipping around the nursery, and I finally, the last few years, I'm like, I'm mulching and planting natives, and I have like hardly any weeds now, and the wildlife that I get at the nursery is incredible. It's like a whole habitat there. So you're creating healthy habitats for, you know, many creatures. The biodiversity you can create with just a small space even is pretty amazing to see the diversity of insects and birds you get. And they've co-evolved with all the critters that are locally around your yard. And it also creates corridors for between natural areas. So here's all these pictures of these critters were all taken at the nursery. Every year we have juncos that lay eggs in the flats of plants. On the left is the ocean spray, and on the right is some thimbleberries. And they usually have, I would say, 2 or 3 clutches. We've even had wrens making nests in tree pots over in our prop area. It's pretty amazing to see all the cool wildlife at the nursery. We get lots of dragonflies. Lately, I've been seeing a really cool green one, and it's so fast I can't get a picture of it. Here's a damselfly on the equisetum in front of the nursery. And every spring we have a lot of bee plant that grows wild all over the nursery. And every spring we get the Chalcedon checker spot caterpillars, literally in the hundreds, eating away the bee plants, which is fine because we have so much. And then, you know, we get all these butterflies in the nursery. It's pretty amazing. And the array of bees that we get at the nursery, I wish I had a little bit more time to like figure them all out, because I could easily see like 15 to 25 species of native bees on a given day at the nursery. And we get cool little skippers on the buckeye. So what are some activities we do now in the garden? Well, if you have a garden, it's a good time to collect some seed in your garden from your plants that you could broadcast in when the rains come. It's a good time to prune because it's dry and the plant will have time to heal over from your cuttings. Deadheading your flower heads, weeding, mulching, getting ready to plant, because the best time to plant natives is November to February when our rains come. That's when we plant also. I just wanted to show you some sheet mulching we did on the lawn at Foothills Park years ago. So we basically, part of the lawn, they were just like, it's always dead. Is there something you can do with it? Because the nursery is in Foothills Park, we actually do a rent swap with them for work in the park. And this was one of the projects they wanted us to work on. So it was a really tricky spot. It's super cold in the winter. It's like permafrost over there. And if you've ever been to Foothills Park, you've probably seen all the deer. So it was going to get herbivory, and it was not going to get any supplemental water. So I came up with a really great species list to kind of bring out the creek area and into a natural meadow into the lawn. And this is we planted in the winter, and then this is spring year 1, and this is spring of year 2. So it's pretty fun if you have a large area in your yard and you just maybe want to convert it to a meadow or just make really great habitat for insects and birds. And even if you don't have a lot of space, I just wanted to let you know, this is on our nursery deck. I have a really large Vaccinium ovatum in a 20-gallon planter, and I have these bee boxes around that we used to make, my volunteer Fred made. And you can see the different size holes, and you can see some of the holes have some mud packed in them. Those already have native bee eggs in there, and then they'll come out this next spring. So even if you have a small space, you can really create a lot. And you can go vertical. One year we had this old pallet sitting around, and I was like, well, let's make a pallet garden out of it. And it has just become this beautiful little garden in between our spaces at the nursery. So here's the cover of the new revised book. Like I said, I'm really excited. We've been working on it tediously for a while. And if any of you have the old book, you'll see a little bit of changes, but I think they're all changes for the better. We've added more information. So this is just a snapshot of the layout. And we kind of go more into flowering times, and we go into wildlife, and we also go into more of the sizes. We also just wanted to show you a quick snapshot of the herbaceous perennials. So everything's broken up into their groups. So it's easy to know what type of plant it is, how big it'll get. We've got evergreen shrubs. And then we have all these great lists in the back of it. And we basically broken it down into different areas in your yard. And then each annual ferns, all the different types of species that'll grow. And we got this great one called the 40's Easiest Garden Plants, which will be fun. And yeah, I'm really excited. The book should be out in the next month, like I said. And we've also, now that we're not having plant sales with the CMPS chapter, we've opened up the nursery to online sales. And you can look online. I think I put it in the resources, and you can see what we have available. And now we can take more questions.
Okay, I'm gonna group another two. We have two questions about fire, and then we also have questions about soil, which I'll get back to. But the two questions about fire, they are different. But the first one, there's some playing outside. One is, what are the best plants to plant in a fire-prone area? But the second question is, given all the recent wildfires and the erosion that's likely to happen with winter rains, what are the best fast-growing plants for the burned areas, both for ground cover and shrubs, that might help stem some of that erosion?
Okay, so Nikki gave a talk, what was it, a few months ago on fire, and I think she's got a great list on there that maybe we could share with the participant, because there's quite a bit. And then on the erosion, I recently attended a webinar with the Santa Cruz RCD, and he is a really great fire guy, and he basically said, unless you're really, really worried about erosion, they're already seen in the Santa Cruz Mountains here, sprouting of native seeds coming up. So you have quite a great seed bank probably from a burn area, and if you could wait to see what comes up this winter, you might be really surprised. They do say you can get some seed of non-fertile barley and stuff, but I'd caution people from using non-native local seed if they're up to wildland, because you probably have a great seed bank already there. And I think that RCD talk for Santa Cruz they recorded it, and I would highly suggest you look at it, because there's also the CMPS of California has a great, I think I have it on, no, I didn't put it on here, but they have a great publication about fire recovery on their website.
Okay, so we shared the blog, and we can share some of those other resources as well. Two questions about soil, Deanna. There's a question about, like, is there a particular ratio soil mix you'd recommend? And then, how do you pasteurize, and is that recommended for your at-home native plant garden?
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about pasteurizing at your home garden. I think there's some really great products out there. I think EB Stone is one of them, Garden in Bloom, I think I've used. And, you know, natives don't want a lot of nitrogen anyways. It's more about the aeration in the soil. A soil mix, I think, you know, you don't want a heavy mix. You want something pretty light that doesn't stay wet for days. You actually want things to be able to dry out so that the roots don't rot. So it's really important to have the right porous levels in your soil. And people are welcome to maybe email me. I didn't put my email on here, did I? And it's easy. It's just nursery@grassrootsecology, and I'm welcome to take some questions like that and give more resources to people.
Okay, Deanna, question from Lynn. Do you have problems with tree squirrels, ground squirrels, and rabbits, and how do you deal with them if you do?
The squirrels don't really get in the nursery. I do have voles and mice, and they're pretty cheeky. So especially with the acorns or certain seeds, I actually have greenhouses at the nursery that I have the seed flats started in, And I also use hardwire or screen material over seed flats to keep them out. But in the garden itself, we definitely have jackrabbits and bunnies, and you know, they eat a little bit. The deer don't get in, but things fare pretty well at the nursery. I don't see any huge herbivory going on. I think sometimes it helps to have some scented plants like salvias that kind of deter herbivory, but I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay, we have a question about whether there's a soil resource you can point people to read more about the soil conditions that are favorable to native plants.
Okay. A soil resource. Well, again, I know in Santa Cruz, I had done a workshop with, who is he with? He's with the Department of Ag in Santa Cruz. Steve, maybe Ellen remembered. Ellen's here. Maybe she remembered. She knows his name. It starts with a T. But he had a great presentation on types of soils and what to look for. And maybe I could find that and share it on the presentation. I can look for that.
Okay, here's a question from earlier from Janie. Would you say there are plants that have high habitat value that are underutilized in home gardens? Like what would be some great ones to start with that offer you a lot of habitat value for, you know, for a single plant or a couple plants?
I would say that for native bees, they really love all the grandelias, the gum plants, all the phacelias, and all the buckwheats. I would say if I had to choose one, maybe buckwheats. That's a great one, and it doesn't take up a ton of space. Gosh, that's hard. And then maybe a shrub, so you have something for. So coffee berry is pretty amazing. I really like coffee berry. It's pretty easy to grow. You can prune it. It has fruit for the birds. It also has, the bees love the flowers in the spring.
Okay, we have a specific question about clayey soil and plants that are struggling to grow. Is it an aeration issue? Do you amend soils? What's your differential on that?
So around Palo Alto and Portola Valley, I know there's a lot of clay soils, and we actually, in the native plant book, we have a list of plants for clay soils. So there is quite a bunch. I think it's hard to totally amend clay soils because, I mean, on a large scale, because that's the soil that's there. So that's kind of a tricky one. But there are a lot of natives that like clay soil. And maybe I could share that, that list on the resources. I could make a shot of it from the book.
Okay, one more question from before, and you touched on this a little bit, but I do think people have a lot of questions and uncertainty about how to water your native plants once you have them, and that we know you do need to water them, but perhaps some kinds of watering are not good for them. Is there a hard and fast rule?
It's all species dependent, unfortunately. I mean, I always tell people don't over irrigate your ceanothus and manzanitas in the summer. They'll just rot. Or Fremontodendron, you know, some of those more chaparral kind of species really don't want much water. Um, and, and then you have other species that just love water, like wax myrtles and azaleas and lilies. And then you've got the ones in between, you know, the buckwheats. And so that's a really hard one. I think natives in general like deep watering, and then they like time to like dry out, but not like get bone dry, but they like a period in between of deep watering. They don't want just a little bit of water every day. They want like deep watering, like maybe in the summer. For some gardens, you might need to do 2 days a week while being established, or depending on if you want your garden to look more green. I mean, that's another thing to think about is aesthetics, because a lot of them go kind of dormant or completely dormant in the summer because they know there's no water. So that's a tricky one.
Well, I don't see any new questions, I don't think. I think we got to most of the question themes.
Hey.
So yeah, which I think is pretty good timing.
Yay. Well, I enjoyed talking with you all. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me if you have more specific questions. I'm more than happy to try and answer or lead you in the direction of finding better answers, resources. Yeah.